Hey everybody, this is Smudboy. Thank you for attending another interview. I'm here with Sickboy from the GamingAnarchist Collective, and we are going to be talking about, I think, the weekly events about, well, just gaming in general, I think.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so I think the first story that we can go chronologically here is another one about Leigh Alexander, who doesn't seem to not enjoy the spotlight. She's always there for something. And this was on February 27th. She comments on the developers that have recently commented on Gamergate, such as Mark Kern and Ken Levine. Mark Kern, of course, is the very famous person of the hashtag Let Mark Speak, and Ken Levine is from Bioshock fame. Most of the devs who have been pompously neutral or in favor of GG are over a certain age and work in outmoded design forms. I don't know what a so-called game journalist has to say about game design, but how are they outmoded? I can't really mention or comment on that.
I don't know. I mean, I can only imagine that Bioshock, Diablo, StarCraft, and those kind of games, that just no one's playing them. Clearly, they're not popular in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, they're just totally out of date. They just don't know what they're doing.
What I find so baffling about this is like, particularly someone like Mark Kern, who's come out and literally gone, "I'd like to know what's going on, please. Can I talk to both people?" And then literally people are going, "You piece of shit! How dare you not treat these people like they're terrorists? They're all evil. You must decry them all as harassers and monsters." He's like, "Yeah, harassment's terrible. I just want to know what's going on. Let's talk about stuff." And people are going mad at him for not just going out and flat out denouncing everyone who's ever used that hashtag should be shunned and destroyed, and they're terrorists and monsters. And you go, what is wrong with you people?
I'm kind of curious what he actually did beforehand, because he was sort of nothing on the radar, and then all of a sudden he just opened up his mouth and said, "Hey, you know what? I did notice there is some disparity here between what Polygon and Kotaku have been doing. Can we please talk about that? I think you might be part of the problem. Let's solve it."
I think it says a lot about the nature of the argument, because obviously there's more than kind of two direct sides, but of course if you look at, like, there's Gamergate, people involved in it actively, and then those who are not just not in Gamergate, but those who actively just despise Gamergate. Because there's a huge myriad and spectrum of people, from neutrality to leaning towards one or the other and what have you. But then you've got the vehement anti-side, and then the side that just kind of like post on the tag all the time. And so I've noticed that whenever someone comes along and says, "I'd like to know what's going on, I want to talk to people," particularly if they're a developer or a journalist, people start coming along and wanting to talk to them. Very kind of, maybe sometimes they're a bit overwhelming, because they just kind of like descend on the guy and just want to throw information at the person and say, look at this, let's talk about this. And he's just come out and just done that, and he's been embraced by one side for going, "Thank you for having a conversation about this." Things happened, for example, with also the journalist David Packman had the same response when he came out and said, was vehemently opposed in general to Gamergate, but because he would interview people like Total Biscuit and he would actually have conversations with people and want to hear the information, the side that's being, I'd say, fairly to say, being defamed, they are just willing to have a conversation. They just want to be heard, even if they're going to be criticised. Whereas the other side, like, no, there's no conversation to be had. These people are all sexist, misogynistic shitlords and must be destroyed.
That's kind of curious, because whenever I go onto the Gamergate hashtag, I check it out every day for my trip to and from work. I notice that there's a wide variety of Gamergate people. They sometimes like it, they sometimes sort of like it, they're sort of skeptical, but they have a lot of differing opinions. When it comes to the anti-Gamergate people, they are just extremely against anything, any kind of conversation. They're extremely liberal. They have to support anything related to women or feminism, anything that has anything to do with a concept or the idea that you're being a male is bad. It's pretty bad. Like, even today I was chatting to about 2 or 3 of them, and they were just throwing the gender gap myth at me. I was like, dude, can we please talk about game journalism? And this was an actual journalist for some undisclosed newspaper. I was just awed at what this person was saying, and eventually I got blocked, and I thought, okay, this is ridiculous. It's very strange trying to reach out and just say, hey, why do you think this? Why is this going on? And then you get nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, I reached out before kind of Gamergate happened. I've always been kind of I've tried to keep myself somewhat under the radar, because I don't really want to define myself by throwing myself at the cliffs of people and screaming on behalf of Gamergate. I've felt a bit sort of hesitant to just throw myself in there. One of the reasons is because there's a lot of people trying to monetize stuff, and that just doesn't go down well. It just causes problems and friction and drama, and I just wanted to stay on point, deal with the issues that I really do believe that there are issues in the journalistic industry, and journalistic integrity even, and that's a problem that needs to be addressed. There's always been that kind of backslapping cliqueism, and I'd like to see that end. And it's just absolutely it's just complete and utter madness to see how things are. And you do see this complete difference. That I tried to speak to, say, Zoe Quinn as and when the whole Five Guys thing happened, and I wasn't getting involved. I didn't feel like I wanted to get involved in that because it just felt a bit grubby and personal. But I remember speaking to her because she was saying things like, "You cannot Google Nathan Grayson Depression Quest and find anything. You're lying." And I said, "No, hang on a minute. There are articles that he wrote about you, so don't lie. Admit it. Just say, look, okay, maybe I did. Maybe it's not on me. It's on him. Frankly, I can sleep with whoever I want. I'm a developer. Maybe he should have been a bit more discreet. Maybe that's on him. I'm sorry if people are a bit annoyed, just step away from the limelight." But that's not how these kind of ideologues seem to work. That those kind of people, if they get any kind of criticism for things that they've either rightfully or wrongly done, in this case, she openly admitted to being a bit of a douchebag, and people were calling her out for being a douchebag. And then all of a sudden, she's a victim and being horrifically attacked. And then that's obviously that kind of precipitated a lot of what happened. And I said in the first, literally just be contrite. Just be contrite and just go, do you know what? Personal matter. But yeah, I was a bit of a dick to Aaron, to be honest. And I'm going to step away from the internet for a couple of weeks until this all blows over. It would have blown over. It would have been over in minutes. But the journalists involved in her little sort of clique, her little group of friends, they were desperate to just keep hammering the message home that anyone speaking about this was a scumbag, to the point where people who didn't even have any interest in the topic all of a sudden became embroiled in it, and then it became a mass censorship issue, and then lots of people started getting involved. It was ridiculous. Streisand effect.
And it seems as if the average person who doesn't know a thing about Gamergate or Zoe Quinn, they always ask, well, what did she do? Well, she made a game that's kind of controversial or kind of boring. And after that, we're like, okay, well, then what? Like, is she still making games? We don't know exactly what she does. We don't know if she's making something further. I think the latest thing was a website she created to help people who are being harassed online. I don't know the business model of this. I don't know what...
It's a reference to the film Hackers as well, because it's called Crash Override.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to that awful Johnny Lee Miller film from the 90s.
I'm trying to fathom, like, what exactly is this group going to do for people? I just can't... There's no legal power. There's nothing...
They talk about that they're consulting, but it turns out that there's been I noticed a thing just on Twitter just a few minutes ago before we started recording, that in fact that there's a new initiative. So that Crash Override thing is over. There's now a new initiative with Randy Harper and Zoe Quinn and Alex Lifshitz, and they're putting together a new thing. So they're doing some kind of new initiative to stop online harassment, because that's now how she's making a living now, it seems, by speaking at events and talking about online harassment.
Well, she gets a good chunk of Patreon money every month for doing I don't know what, and it pays her rent at least. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell what's real and what's not. I mean, because you see a lot of her and her partner Alex Lifshitz. They seem to talk a lot about their being homeless for the last 7 months. And it's like, well, really, what with what you're raking in on Patreon, and what the fact that not to go into any delicate private information, the pair of you are both from very wealthy families. Don't pretend you're being run out of your own home. This is it's silly behaviour. It's hyperbole, and it's precipitated this issue. And you see that the likes of, say, Alexander Lifshitz, you can see he's a really odd character. I don't know if you know much about him.
I can't say I have, no.
He is he's worked as an intern on a few games, none that are really all that noteworthy, and he was a producer on some Connect Disney game, I think. And he did a speech about how gamers are scum and should be broken on racks, and then proceeded to snap a DVD of Grand Theft Auto in half.
Oh, that was the guy. Okay.
That was him. That's him. That's Zoe Quinn's boyfriend. So there's a certain degree of loathing of the industry within. They've got that kind of outsider-insider attitude, and they clearly want to stir up drama and controversy, because that's then how they define themselves. And now all of a sudden they're acting in the way of advocates for survivors of abuse. And you think, well, a lot of your behaviour is pretty damn abusive. That guy Alex Lifshitz is, sorry, you said that said that they're hot trash and gamers are hot trash and should be broken on racks for wanting to play GTA. It's like, you're going to come out and speak on behalf of people who've been harassed and abused? You sound like a scumbag.
I would rather these people, with all their motivation and anger, actually go ahead, make a game that they think is ideal for them, or even based on their experiences of harassment. Because if Zoe Quinn can make a story about depression, I'm sure she's more than equipped to make a story about harassment. Make it Flash, make it iPad compatible, whatever you feel like. If you have all this money to spend on rent, you could probably spend it on learning some basic programming for mobile devices. I would like to see that. I think they can make this wonderful creative endeavor from all their frustrations and passions, if of course they are actually artists that say they want to change things. That's where it comes down to, because again, Gamergate doesn't really care if Anita Sarkeesian wants to make her Man with Boobs game. Great, good for her. If Brianna Wu wants to make another sequel or game about women doing stuff, good for her. It doesn't really bother us. It's their behavior in relation to how they get money, how they get publicity, how this affects the industry. That's what we really care about.
Absolutely agree. And I think that most people involved who love gaming were quite happy to have more games. Obviously, there's some aspect of gaming that obviously I think that a lot of people would be glad went away, like certain big AAA cash-in games. Say they just bung out a game to link in with a film or something. Because obviously at the time that videos were the little brother to the movie industry, and they're still doing that to an extent. Right. And you think, stop now, because seriously, the amount of money you could put in, you could make 10 times more than a Hollywood blockbuster could. Don't be silly. And
I think the new trend, at least we've noticed from last year, which is to blend the two, and I think the only example we can say that was somewhat successful, I guess if you really actually played the game, is a game called Defiance, which has a television spin-off. And I think the Telltale Games company is going to be doing a combination of things where they release a game based off a certain IP, and they'll time it right so that it is released at the same time.
In fact, they just signed a deal with Lionsgate Films that they're going to make a super show that's in essence going to be part episodic game as per the kind of Walking Dead games, and then they're going to tie that in with a TV show, so the people's choices are going to inform the show.
Yes, I think that's rather interesting, because Defiance was not a horrible experiment. It didn't go crashingly bad. I've actually loved science fiction, so when I was watching the show, I was like, hey, they're doing a somewhat of a hero's journey with a daughter involved, and then I don't know how that relates to the games. I never tried it, but at least there was a tie-in. There was some sort of business model. They had people involved with the show and the game, and they were somehow. I didn't know the exact challenges and contests. I was told there were. I don't know the relationship, but to me, that sounds pretty awesome to have a game and a TV relate to each other.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think that it's good to try these new novel models, and the thing is that with games you can tell stories in very different ways to TV and film. Again, with book and theatre, it's a unique model, and it's good to see using novel ways of doing it. I would like to make it less of a push to try and mimic something. And so this is kind of what I'm glad that what's happening, say, with Telltale is that they're trying to modify the TV experience in the same way that there's a game. I don't know if you ever played Brothers: Tale of Two Sons. Right. That game, actually, the mechanics in the game is used to tell the story. So they're actually, I like to see that kind of novel kind of thing. Again, sort of working with more either traditional models or using new ways of telling stories, new kind of narrative devices by using using the player inputs. That's these kind of things are frontiers in storytelling that haven't had an opportunity to exist before. I think that is the future of entertainment.
Yeah, it's a form of co-op play that a lot of modern games, especially things like Dragon Age, Inquisition, could have somewhat borrowed, could have somewhat pushed the genre a bit forward. Aside from going to the pay-to-play model, which they did with Mass Effect 3, even though that was a very highly successful and popular multiplayer option, there wasn't really that much aside from action and shooting. The concept of co-op with having two players having to cooperatively solve puzzles, much like trying to think of the Link's, the Legend of Zelda Four Swords game. Similar to that, where there's puzzle solving that require more than one player to open up a door or to get past a certain area. Okay, so let's go back to Gamergate things, and it turns out that I think it was this week that Brianna Wu had a cup of coffee, and that's about it. That's what she did. And apparently a lot of people didn't like that because she was talking to Brad Wardell, who was or is a Gamergate supporter, or rather just a very intelligent, eloquent fellow who just understands what's going on. He was getting flack for his interview months ago. I believe what did he do that was bad?
Oh, he retweeted a comic that mocked Zoe Quinn sleeping for attention, some people for attention. I think he also, there was some historical issue, I think, which people dug up, that there was some kind of claims of sexual impropriety in his offices, which didn't go anywhere, which the court case didn't continue. So of course people are kind of giving that no smoke without fire. He may not have been convicted, but obviously there's problems with his business. Obviously he's some kind of sexual predator, so you know what these people are like. They'd like to try and dig through people's history in order to just absolutely destroy them, as opposed to deal with the value, the merits of their thoughts. They want to just absolutely decimate whoever they see as their enemy.
Well, now Brianna Wu is technically their enemy, and the rest of Gamergate's like, well, we don't really care. They had a cup of coffee together, they talked about something, none of our business, whoop-de-doo. Social justice warriors think, hey, now she's evil, we must crucify her.
Yeah, she's now the enemy. She is an apostate to the social justice creed, and she's being flayed for it. And I've always contested. In fact, I made a video I think last week on the topics, just asking the question that like, I think that Brianna Wu has a terminal attention-seeking attitude that's going to cause her a lot of misery, and she relies on a lot of hyperbole and a lot of scaremongering in order to get attention and money, and that's no good for anybody. It's not good for her. It's not good for the people that she's defaming. It's just not good for anything at all. But I can imagine. I don't imagine that she's some kind of manipulative evil genius. I think that she is someone who lacks a certain degree of imagination and perspective, and flies off the handle a lot.
I'm kind of concerned with her actual game. It did not get very good, favorable reviews, and this is how we're concerned really about what these people produce. And she has actually produced a game. It was about a 700 meg mobile game. Her concern, she's very pro-feminist. She was making this game for feminists, I assume. I don't think it went well. It went too well with these people. I don't think it really pushed any boundaries. It didn't.
A lot of people. One thing I've noticed that's I find quite amusing with Gamergate is that they like to point out hypocrisy, and they like to hammer it home to the point that when people start going, "Oh, who cares?" and then they go hands up and go, "Exactly."
Yes.
We've literally just you've been hoisted by your own petard. That's how this works. And so, for example, a lot of people were claiming that the design for the women in her game were overly sexualized, that they were stick figure Barbie dolls, that they were all fighting fuck toys, and they just pulled out all of the sort of elite Sarkeesian kind of language, and as a result, a lot of people went, actually, yes, I don't like the models. I do think they're overly. How come I can see this woman's navel through her jumpsuit? How come her waist is as wide as her wrist? This is, So now she was kind of thickening up the models and trying to change the proportions in order to please people, add more kind of armor to the jumpsuits to make it seem less kind of sexualized. And ultimately, it's a losing battle because you cannot make these people happy.
Well, that's true, but if you actually look at these models, they are hourglass blonde figures with face tattoos. It's sort of like, okay, this is her own magical world she invented.
Is this progressive feminism's face of a strong, independent female character?
I would love to see their definition and their instance of a strong, independent female character that they are happy with. I don't think there is ever going to be one at all. It's just not going to happen.
But I mean, look what happened. Look, you have somebody like Rhianna Pratchett write this. No, she co-wrote the script, but was I think one of the lead writer for the Tomb Raider game. I enjoyed the game. I thought it was a pretty good story. I thought it was quite a good hero's journey. I liked the idea of it. And a lot of people were complaining, well, you've hurt her too much now. That's abusive. Oh, look, there's a scene where someone leers at her, and you have to QTE and then kill him. And there was the whole, if you recall, there was a whole drama about the rape scene in Tomb Raider because there's a QTE where a guy is leering at her and is about to strangle her. If you don't complete the QTE, he strangles you. He doesn't sexually assault her. He strangles her. But that was taken completely out of context before the game had even been released. Then all of a sudden, it was the game where Lara Croft gets raped, and then it's sexist and it's terrible. And you go, what? They're trying to write a genuine story about what, a somewhat realistic story of what would happen if a capable young lady was put in a situation where she was battered and beaten and faced horror, and could she rise up and survive that?
They seem to not understand this relationship between art and reality. Really, we have art that's based off reality. We use these themes, these controversial, violent, sexual themes, to show the horrors of reality. And that's how we express it. We get it out of our systems. We say, hey, you know what? Murder is bad. I can let that out in a game. I'm never going to do that in real life. And they think if they remove that from the games, then they're going to remove that from life is completely fallacious. We need to have violence. We need more violence in games. We need uber violence. We need to show people, what's your threshold for gore? How can you appreciate what you have now if you're in this fantasy world where anything could happen and there's violence and stuff like that? And they don't understand the relationship between even just, let's say, Shakespeare, that had lots of blood and gore in several of his stories, and why that's been celebrated over the years.
Absolutely. I think that you cannot remove that from human nature. It's integral to human nature that we are, in general, a fairly unpleasant, violent species to a certain degree. And we have certainly in the West, we're in a fairly peaceful society. There's very little in the way of violence, as there was historically. So we're in a much more peaceful place now. There's a lot less conflict. People are living longer. People are living much more sedentary, less exciting lives, and people crave. There's a lot of people who crave that kind of adrenaline input, and they seek it through media. And what's wrong with that?
I seem to recall a scene in Tomb Raider. I didn't play the game. I saw a video of it where with Lara Croft, if you miss or die or whatever, she gets impaled through her neck in a very violent falling.
Yeah,
and it's extremely brutal, and it just makes you go, oh my god! It just, like, looking at the scene really makes you cringe, and seeing it over and over and over again. Eventually, you're like, okay, fine, I suck. I got to keep dodging this. So you get over that initial feeling of horror and gore. You say, okay, wait a second, I can't progress unless I focus and try not to die. That's how gaming works. That's how you get better, you learn. And for a singular story with Lara Croft as a strong female character, I thought that was a very good production.
Yeah, I like that. Certainly for the beginning of the game, she's constantly just being beaten and bruised, and within the first minute of gameplay, she gets impaled with a rebar through the side. She has to set herself on fire to escape her ropes that she's tied in. It's, she takes a lot of punishment, and then by the time you reach kind of the end of the end of the second act, she's an absolute killing machine. And that's kind of the point, that she starts off kind of panicky and afraid and being hurt, and then she kind of builds that kind of confidence. And by the end, she's chasing down kind of whole gangs full of these marauding men, shouting at them that she's coming to get them.
Sounds like it's a feminist dream come true.
That's what I don't understand. If anything, it's showing this weak young girl. She's just taken out a whole island full of these crazies. If anything, you should be going, you go, girl. But oh no, because she's vulnerable at some point, therefore it's bad. I mean, there's critique to be had as to how the game itself was handled mechanically in some respects. You could make certainly the critiques that the story wasn't the greatest story ever written, but as a piece of popcorn entertainment, it was solid. I cannot see what was so glaringly wrong about it that you have to consider it so horrific to claim that there was rape in the game that there never was, and that it was she was being unfairly hurt because other action heroes don't get hurt. Well, those stories aren't origin stories. This is specifically an origin story, and in this, it's taking young graduates going on some field experience. All of a sudden, gets thrust into a place where she has to scramble around to survive.
Right.
You know, it's not kind of, you know, it's not like the original Tomb Raider where it's like, here's your two guns, go into there and shoot that dinosaur.
Yeah, no more dinosaurs.
There's not a single dinosaur. I mean, there was some kind of mumbo jumbo involved, but there were no dinosaurs.
Okay, let's go back to the wonderful world of Gamergate, and here we have 8chan, of course the V board, found out that Polygon's Ben Kuchera, who's pretty much our weekly whipping boy, backed something called or Dagut Fabrique's Sportsfriends, and which was reported on in 2014, and he failed to disclose any information about it. Well, that's not the best thing to say about Ben Kuchera, considering in the past he was very pro-journalistic. He had a few tweets we unearthed. I'm going to post them right now about him being, hey, you know, if there's a conflict of interest, you have to report that, you have to step back, and that's that. And here we have Ben Kuchera doing the exact opposite.
Well, exactly. In fact, that's exactly what he blocked me for. At one point, he was talking about how terrible Gamergate was, and I said, well, maybe this wouldn't have happened if you'd have been more forthcoming with your disclosure. You specifically, Ben. Because you went massively on the defensive and you have backed half of these people's Kickstarters. And he just left some snarky comment and blocked me. I was like, that was months back.
Oh dear.
You're a small, like, you're an emotional child. You're so defensive. When ultimately you could go, yeah, okay, maybe we should take a bit of, you know, see what happened with when he was asked, take a bit of responsibility for the fact that you as a senior editor at one of these websites could have done better. And as a result to that, he gets defensive and goes out on the attack.
And this is an actual games journalist. This is a guy who actually studied it.
Yeah, he's senior editor at Polygon. He's not some jobbing freelancer or something.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious who actually listens to this guy. I mean, Polygon is still a fairly large website, but I'm kind of curious knowing if anyone knows about this guy anymore. Are they ever going to want to read him?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the last article of his I saw, it was literally about a sentence, and it was taken from a tweet of one of the developers of Far Cry 4, where he showed a screenshot of him kicking an eagle in the face, and the article that he wrote that I presume that he's paid for this as part of his tenure. It was, what do you think about this? Literally, it was like a sentence. What do you think about this? Question mark. A picture of the tweet. And that was a little op-ed from him. You go, what is the point of your existence? if all you write is either self-gratifying hit pieces on people who ask you to behave better, or just ridiculous stuff like retweeting something on your website and going, it's fun to kick an eagle in the face. Oh, but it's cruelty to animals. Is that it? Is that the whole of your thought process? Tell me your opinion on this tweet. Jesus Christ. Journalists shouldn't be doing this. I know that the internet has lowered the barrier of entry for a lot of media roles, but it seems just depressing that people who are actual professionals, senior editors at these websites, just can't act like a bloody professional. It's all they have to do with their lives. That's their careers. This is a man, I think he's got, this is a family man, I think he's got like 5 children, and he's acting like some teenager throwing a tantrum.
I'm not exactly sure how we treat Polygon anymore on the Gamergate side. I know there's been a whole blacklist we've had. I'm sure that's still in effect for a lot of people. I don't know if emails are still being sent out, but this is just a common thing we've been seeing is when are these guys going to eventually figure out what they're doing is wrong? And until we see some changes with the staff, especially from Kuchera, I mean, maybe they'll have one good post, and we got to give them credit for that if it's a very well done piece. But I haven't been holding a candle. I haven't been looking out for it. But we have to give it credit if it's due. If it comes out, I'd be willing to read it. Till then, I haven't seen a piece by Polygon in weeks, really, that's worth reading.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for if Polygon wants to be a progressive social justice publication, and if they want to be that, that's their prerogative, free market and all that. But my issue is that when they talk about that, they talk about it like they think that they're a minority, when in fact, if you look at the Escapist, who hired a couple of people who support Gamergate, one of whom is a bit of a conservative, there was all of a sudden a complete and utter shitstorm that someone has right-leaning tendencies has a job in the gaming industry. You think that there's no balance there. There's literally none. If you can have, how can you possibly think it's appropriate to start saying, right, we need to blacklist this publication on the grounds that I don't agree politically with their new hire? It's one thing. The reason that it came to this, the reason that the politics became such an issue, is because people said, stop treating us like dicks, and they said, shut up, you dicks and you scum and you terrorists, and you all need to shut the fuck up. And that's then why the social justice argument got dragged into this.
It's as if I think we would probably need some sort of a group apology, some sort of like, oops, yeah, we shouldn't have said that, sort of the same way they had that timed Gamers Are Dead articles come out. We should have a timed, oh, we didn't mean it, we're sorry, we work for you guys sort of deal. If that something like that would happen, I think we would have probably a little more appreciative and open to listening to these guys, at least from now on.
Yeah, I'd say the majority of people involved in Gamergate are a very forgiving bunch. They've been very welcoming of people who have been very scathing towards them, provided that they think they're fair.
Oh, it's difficult, even daily with our tweets to new people who hit the tag with drivel, or they'll post some sort of Gamergates Are Dead article or what have you. It's like talking to a wall, but you might get the one person who's willing to listen for a few minutes, but that's it. It doesn't really go that far. So their minds are pretty much made up on that front. So I'm kind of curious where we can find a middle ground with these people, aside from just unearthing more crap. It's a daily thing now. That's why I'm probably going to keep talking to you every week now, because it's just too much information for me to digest. Really?
Yeah, I think so. It's become this almighty mess, and there are some people who've been maintaining some wikis. There's a Gamergate wiki that people are trying to maintain to try and build. And when it comes to information, I mean, I tend to take it with a pinch of salt, because some of the things that people consider big deal, I don't necessarily agree with. Obviously, it's all down to really personal preference. There are some things that I consider a big deal, other things not so much. But it's, saying like, oh, this person has tweeted this person, therefore it's an issue. No. Conflict of interest is a very specific thing in my eyes. Not just knowing somebody isn't enough for it to be a conflict of interest. I mean, having tweeted at them is not necessarily a conflict of interest. Are you in some way financially tied to them? Is your opinion in some way emotionally invested in them? In that case, then you have a disclosure issue. Just knowing somebody isn't sufficient. So there are cases where people kind of maybe make a mountain out of a molehill, but at the same time, it's largely that the debate needs to be had, and the issue comes that people refuse to have that debate, and that's why it just keeps spiraling and spiraling.
Well, one of the things that's a little personal to me is what happened yesterday between Davis Mjarini and Jordan Owen. This is about the Sarkeesian Effect documentary movie they've been working on for the past 6-7 months, and they've called it Splits. And I had an interview with Davis yesterday about that. And these are things that really shouldn't happen, having meltdowns, having breakdowns between your team.
No, I saw Jordan's video. I saw your interview. I listened to your interview today, and it's so unfortunate. And so many people are lining up to rip this apart, and I would like this to stand on its merit. I'd like their opportunity to create what they want to create, and for it to stand or fall on its relative merits. And of course, in general, they've already received, from coming out of the gate, they received so much scoffing that they were even going to do this. And it is such a shame that personal issues have gotten in the way of something that it should just be, allow it to create, allow it to exist, and then let it, be part of the whole, open marketplace of ideas. That's a good thing. What's wrong with more opinions and more information?
Right, and the way that this was handled, I personally think it was not done. I have reached out to Jordan several times. I have not gotten a response. What's I think is going to happen is there's going to be some form of conflict. Davis is going to do his thing, which is he has his footage. He's going to make his version. Jordan, I don't know exactly what he's going to do. I believe he's going to make his version eventually, and there's going to be some sort of legal battle. But if there's no contract involved, I don't know how that's going to work. It is a mess right now, and this should never have happened. And I wish that we could have, somehow resolved this. I was looking for a third party, like even myself or other YouTubers, to talk people through this. But it's really right now in Jordan's hands. If he's not communicating, and that's the worst thing that could happen, is just stopping communicating between everyone. So
Yeah, I don't see how it couldn't have been finished, especially if as what I gather it being a personal issue of not even them as the people that the people that they are acquainted to. That seems to, if it's a personal issue, it seems to have no relevance. That realistically, you don't have to have a personal relationship with someone you're having a professional working relationship with.
that's correct. And this is, I mean, these are two people on opposite ends of the political spectrum. I'm sure they don't see eye to eye on many other topics. And we were already aware of this way back in October when they had a little sit down where we saw the two people in the same hotel room, and they were talking about politics and whatever. And they were, hey, you know what? We totally disagree with each other, but we can get along. We're professional. We're mature. And I thought, perfect. Those are the guys that I want doing this job. And something along those lines between then and that, between October and now, just broke. And it's really sad to see that, because everything sounded fine. Yeah, they were a month overdue between their 5-month limit. They were asking for money then to do some post-production work. And now it's going to take even longer to get done.
Yeah, I mean, as far as crowdfunding goes, anyway, an extra month is not really an issue compared to kind of the deliverables of so many crowdfunding. I mean, it's always been somewhat of a Mickey Mouse affair when people reach to crowdfunding, because the assurances aren't there. You're relying on somebody's word. You're relying on their reputation. And there's very little in the way of comeback for those people who choose to invest. So I was hoping to see, whenever I see these examples come up, I hope to see them work well. And really, 1 month over, I think is an acceptable margin of error there.
Well, yeah, well, they actually projected 5 months, which I thought was little. I thought that was pushing it, because they didn't get their full funding, and they still went through with it. And I was like, wow, you guys are really serious about this. And to our knowledge, all the footage is done. They just got to do post, and that's a big editing job. So good luck to them. I hope we see a finalized product, not two products. Although I'd like to see anything really within the next few weeks, or rather the few months, however long it takes to edit this thing. And yeah, I just wish that we can talk to Jordan directly.
Yeah, it seems to be that he's having a very serious personal issue with regards to this, and it's unfortunate, because I would have thought that even well-meaning people who weren't in support of their opinion would be interested in seeing how they reach it and what argumentation they use to get there.
Oh yeah, when we saw the what was his name from the GTA fiasco regarding the
Jack Thompson.
Yeah, when they released that video of Jack Thompson, I was like, oh my god, this is serious. And
yeah, wow, you've gone to this guy who he's been labeled as a crackpot for his opinions.
And he comes across, and we hear him. He's like, you know what? No, he's sensible. He was just very passionate at that point in time, and he probably jumped the gun a few scientific journals ahead than he should have. But no, that was like, okay, perfect. These guys know what they're doing. They're serious. Everything's looking great. Ugh.
Yeah,
anyway,
it's a fun one actually with him, because it obviously gets. If he were to say, "I don't think children should be playing these games," everyone would reply, "No, of course not." But you don't get the attention from that, do you? You get the attention from shouting and screaming that this is of the devil and must be banned.
Well, that's what I'd like to see from his now mirror image of Arnita Sarkeesian, to say something sensible from whatever she's been talking about over the years, because I cannot watch past the first one. Everything about it just screams nonsense to me. I'm actually going to have an interview on Saturday about this topic. It's been eating away at me. I've done blog posts about it. This is something that eventually I didn't even want to talk about. This is such a waste. It's just such nonsense. But apparently, we have to have a conversation about. I know you've talked about it. I know several other people online have talked about it. It's such a silly thing to put politics in where it doesn't need to be. Whatever the politic is, whatever the perspective on what a piece of media should be and what you think you see, what isn't there, is really, it's like asking a painter to evaluate a the construction of a swimming pool. It doesn't really make sense. Like, why would you do this? But eventually we have to explain to people that you ask people who are actual critics of things they criticize or know things about to do their job, not a culture critic to evaluate a culture, if that's even what she does. I don't even know. So yeah, I can go on this topic for a bit. I'm going to be talking about that later, but thank you very much for your time, Sick Boy. We're probably going to be doing this next week if anything crazier happens. Hopefully not. Maybe another week from then, but thank you very much for your time, and I do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.